Julie from Heart to Hand Stamping, and I have got a brand new video tutorial for you today, and it's for this sweet little baby's card. It's actually perfect for a baby shower because the sentiment I've used says the world is full of miracles and none so precious as the one on the way to you. So this is a great card to give before the baby's actually born. And some of the techniques that I'll be going over in this card will be obviously a lot of die cutting. We'll be using gesso, and I'll be showing you a lovely background technique using inks and gesso. We'll also be using some glitter with the gesso also, because gesso can act as an adhesive. The other thing I'll be going over is partial stamping and showing you how you can take an image and just use part of that image. And I'm going to show you how I did that to get these sweet little animals in these circles. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Well, let's jump in and get started. But first of all, I just want to apologize if you can hear some wind in the background. It's a very windy day here, and it also might be creating a little bit of light flickering on my work surface. So I do apologize for that today if you can hear that. Now, the first thing we're going to do is take a piece of Whisper White cardstock, and you're simply going to cut that in half, and you're going to trim 1 centimetre off the top and 1 centimetre off the side. And then you're going to take a piece of mint macaron cardstock and do the same thing, cut it in half and trim 1/2 centimetre off the top and 1/2 centimetre off the side. And so as you can see, they will stack nicely. Now, the first thing we're going to do is to emboss our mint macaron. And I'm going to be using our corrugated embossing folder for that today. However, I want to emboss this entire piece, but as you can see when I lay it in my folder, it's actually not going to do it. I've got this bit hanging out the bottom. So I'm going to show you how I emboss this so I can get that pattern evenly embossed over this whole piece of cardstock. So I've brought in my Big Shot to show you how I do the embossing. Stampin'Up no longer sell this Big Shot embossing machine. They're actually coming up with a brand new one, which I'm very excited to see. But for now, I'm going to be using what I have, and that's a Big Shot. You can use whatever die cutting machine you have. So the first thing we want to do is line up our cardstock into our embossing folder. So what I'm going to do is line up the top first, and you don't want to take your cardstock right up to the fold. You actually want to bring it down into the patterned area like that and line it up at the sides. It's because these are horizontal lines and we want to make sure they're running horizontally along our piece. And we're going to pop it down. I'm going to add my embossing plate over the top like this, and I am going to send this through, but I don't want to take this all the way to the edge. I want to stop short of the edge because otherwise that will give me a straight line that I don't want. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm actually going to bring it back again like this. Okay, and so now I have a partially embossed piece, as you can see. But what's really nice is I don't have any harsh line here. I've got a nice soft edge now that I can blend in. So what we do now is we simply turn our cardstock around and line up the already embossed area, and it will line up really easily because it will just slot into those grooves really nicely like that. And we're going to repeat this process again, being careful not to emboss right to the edge. So we'll send this through again, and I can see the edge of my folder here through my plate. So I'm just going to stop short of that, and I'm going to come back again. Now you can see I have embossed all over, but it's a little bit flat where I've done my join, so that's easy to fix. You just take your embossing folder, line up the lines and simply run that through and do it again. So I have my mint macaron piece of cardstock all embossed now, and I'm just going to set that aside for a moment. We're now going to concentrate on our Whisper White piece of cardstock that we just cut, and we're going to be using our layering circles dies for this. Now I'm going to create a pattern of circles here, and I've actually taken 6 various size plain circles out of this die set, just various sizes here, and I'm just going to play around with placing them on here. So I kind of thought the biggest one about here, then the next size here, and I kind of liked that one there, and maybe here, here and here, something like that. But you can play around with whatever you like, what looks good to you. I kind of like this placement, and I'm going to take that to my die cutting machine and cut all of those out. So I've die cut those holes now, and I've just placed it on my mint macaron to show you. Now you can use any size, as I've said before, and you can also use any amount of circles you'd like to use. I just happen to like this, and I'll measure, in case you want to use the same circles as I have, I'll measure them for you. The largest one is 7.4 centimeters, and then 6.7 centimeters. This one is 5.5 centimeters. This one is 4.2 centimeters, 3.5 centimeters, and my smallest one is 2.8 centimeters. So they're all the circles that I've used. So we'll set those aside for a moment, and we're going to set our mint macaron aside also. And we're going to be getting out our white gesso. I'll just bring in a piece of scrap paper to do this on. So we're going to be using white gesso today. As I've said before, I picked mine up from Spotlight or any art supply store, and I've actually squirted some into a little container like that, and we're going to be creating a really pretty soft background. Now you're going to need a brush, a wide sort of brush for this. The size I have here is 3 centimeters, but any sort of wider brush will work just fine. So use what you have. And we're going to be also using our mint macaron re-inker for this technique. So all we're going to do is we're just going to take our re-inker, and we're just going to put 2 drops in our gesso like that, just so they're separate and apart. And then we're going to take our brush and we're just going to dab it into the gesso and pick up that ink on our brush like that. And then we're just going to take our piece of cardstock and we're just going to do a horizontal stroke back and forwards like that. And you can see we get this lovely sort of soft effect with our mint macaron. And you simply just keep repeating this step, just a couple of drops like that. Again, brush in like that, pick it up, and you just run it across your cardstock like that. So we end up with a lovely soft background like this, and you'll notice that I have some brush strokes in here as well, which adds some really lovely texture into our background also. So now we're going to set this aside to dry, or you can speed up the drying process with your heat tool. Okay, the next thing we need to do is actually gesso all our circles. And I'm going to show you a different technique on how to do that. Now, the reason I'm adding gesso to these also is because when you add white gesso to the Whisper White, it actually changes the color. So it becomes more of an off-white. So to keep unity throughout my project, I'm going to have to make sure that I actually add gesso to all of my white pieces so that it all looks the same color. So this time I'm using a smaller paintbrush, taking my gesso again, and I'm going to be really generous with this, and I'm just going to apply it to my circle, but quite thickly and generously, because I need this to be wet for the next step that I'm going to be doing. So just add it. Don't worry too much about brush strokes or anything like that at the moment. We can smooth those out. So the next thing I'm going to use a very special tool, and that's my finger. And I'm just going to stamp that into my mint macaron ink pad, and I'm just going to add this to the bottom of my circle here, and I'm just going to blend it with my finger. And you can see how nicely that actually blends out that gesso. And I'll do the other side and I'll show you in a minute. I'm going to use a different finger so I don't get gesso in my ink pad. Using a different finger now. And I'm going to come and do the same thing on the other side. Like that. And you can come and just blend that. And if you want to, you can add a little bit more gesso. Here, I just want to blend that a little bit more, and using another finger. Now remember, you have 5 on each hand, so you're going to run out of fingers. And now I have this really pretty blended effect with my ink, and I'm going to repeat that on all of my circles. Just be sure to have a baby wipe on hand to wipe that gesso and ink off your fingers in between each circle, and be really careful not to dab gesso into your ink pad. Well, I've finished doing my circles now, and as you can see, it just is a beautiful technique to give just some really lovely soft color around the edge. And I've made sure that I've used my finger to actually smooth that gesso out in the circle also, in the center, sorry, because I'll be stamping on these later. So I do want a nice smooth finish on these circles. So we'll just set those aside to completely dry. And while we have our gesso out, we're going to continue. Now, I've taken a piece of Whisper White thick cardstock. I've scored it in half and I've folded it in half, and this will be our card base. Now remember, I told you earlier that white gesso actually changes the color of Whisper White cardstock, and we're going to actually be seeing part of our card base. So what I want to do is just run a little bit of gesso around that edge, just so that that will be tied in with, now you can use a paintbrush for this. Again, I'm just using my finger because it's quicker. And all I want to do is just add a little bit to the edge of my card base like that, and I'm going to continue all around the edge. I've finished that now. I've gone all the way around the outer edge of my card base, and I'm going to set that aside to dry also. Now the next step I want to do again with my white gesso is I'm going to take my piece of mint macaron that I embossed earlier with my corrugated embossing folder, and I want to add some gesso to the background as well, just to tie it into the rest of the project. Now gesso can also act as a kind of adhesive, so I'm going to actually bring in some of my Dazzling Diamonds glitter, which is beautiful, and when I apply the gesso, I'm going to quickly apply my Dazzling Diamonds to it also before it dries, just to have a little bit of glitter in the background also. So again, I'm going to be using my finger for this because I want kind of a distressed look. So what I'm going to do is dab my finger in the gesso and take off any excess, and I'm just going to come and run my finger like that And then I'm going to take some of my Dazzling Diamonds, and I do have a scrap piece of paper under here to catch any excess, like that. And I'm going to flick off the excess, and what I'm left with is where I've put my gesso and it's been wet, it's actually caught some of that glitter as well. So I'm going to continue doing this technique over my whole entire surface, and I'll show you what that looks like when I'm finished. I also need to add a little bit of gesso and glitter around the edges, and again just take your finger and run that along the edge like that, and then just dip it into some glitter that you've put on your scrap piece of paper. Flick off the excess and we end up with a nice edge also, and I'm going to do that all the way around my edges.